it became almost like an agreement between me and the audience. It's like, I'm going to give you 15 minutes of absolute enjoyment and fun, and then you're going to give me 10 minutes of your attention, but like really your attention.
Today's guest is Rabbi Yaakov Glasser. He's the rabbi of Young Israel in Clifton, Passaic, New Jersey. I'm blown away by how intentional Rabbi Glasser has been in his public speaking, how seriously he takes it, how much preparation he puts in, how much he rehearses.
Never less than 3 to 4 hours of prep. Sometimes as much as 5 or 6. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, easily 10 to 12.
We're dealing with a professional, folks. We're dealing with someone who is top of the game. He's been doing it for 20 years plus and treats every single opportunity to speak as an incredible privilege. He doesn't take anything for granted.
You look out at the crowd and there's hundreds of people there, and you say to yourself, none of these people get to stand up and move everybody. Only I do.
He's puts a premium on authenticity, vulnerability. He primarily wants to transform people. It's the battle cry of the Maggid Method. So we're of like mind. I had such an enjoyable conversation with him, and I know you're going to learn so much from a true craftsman, speaking and transformation. So without further ado, this is my interview with Rabbi Yaakov Glasser. Enjoy. I guess maybe where I would start from is that before you were a rabbi or a rav of the shul, you were an NCSY director. And
same time.
Oh, same simultaneous.
Both at the same time, which has a lot to do with this conversation.
Okay. So in my mind, speaking to kids and speaking to adults are two different worlds. You may disagree after having spoken to both on both ends, but I find for kids, in order to be able to engage them, in order to capture their attention, especially in this day and age, it's really hard. I mean, even if they don't have their phones in front of them, somehow there's an invisible screen in front of them, or there's something that's drawing their attention away from you. So how do you, as speaking to kids, teenagers, how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? How do you keep them on you?
That's a great question, and it actually relates a lot to your field. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background, because I think that relates to this whole question. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I got married when I was learning in YU. I learned in YU for about 10 years. And then towards the end of the learning time, I started to do some work for NCSY. And then towards the end of that, I got offered a job to be the regional director of New Jersey NCSY. And it was a great opportunity, and it was amazing. My wife and I had both grown up in NCSY. Both of my parents became from an NCSY.
They met in NCSY, right?
What?
They met in NCSY? That's how they met?
My parents met in NCSY, and my wife and I met in NCSY. So, so it was it was very special to be able to be involved in that. And at the very first regional convention, which is like the big conference with hundreds and hundreds of kids that I was leading. So I got up to speak in what in NCSY is, I guess, the drusha slot, like kind of the premier slot of impact. There are really two. One is Havdalah, which I've done many times, and the other is at Shalshudas.
Mm-hmm. It's called what?
It's called ebbing. As Shabbos ebbs away.
Got it. I saw that there was an NCSY nomination, like I guess like the 60 faces of NCSY, and there was a kid who wrote a glowing review of you, and he was talking about ebbing, and I had no idea what that was. So I guess
so ebbing is at Shalshudas, we kind of extend Shabbos a little longer. We sing songs. It's very emotional. Everyone's in a circle together, and there's supposed to be like a really inspirational speech that kind of I guess harnesses the building momentum of the whole weekend and kind of delivers somewhat of a charge to the kids to do something with it and to, evolve, to advance, to grow spiritually, religiously. So I got up to speak, and I look at the doors of the room, and I see there are what's called advisors, which are like the older collegiates, guarding all of the doors. And so whatever, went through the program, and when it was over, I went over to one of the head advisors, and I asked them, like, why does this place look like, it's on lockdown, which at the time was not such a trigger word,
Yeah.
why does so many people, why do we have guards at all these doors? So they said to me, so that the kids won't leave, right? So I said, well, why don't we have what's going on in here be engaging, interesting, and captivating enough that they don't want to leave? Like, this isn't school. If we have to guard the doors of a youth movement, of an informal educational environment, then we're not really hitting what the goal is here, which is to create an atmosphere and a context, that is more proactive and more initiating and more. So at that point, I decided that that was my goal. My goal was, in terms of my own development with, let's say, this piece, I wouldn't even call it public speaking, but,
Yeah.
religious and spiritual communication, in this space, to create a situation where they want to be there and they want to hear the message. And so I kind of decided to develop this, I guess, just like you developed a technique, which I'm very interested to hear. I kind of decided to develop my own technique, and that's when I started to study comedy. And I worked very, very hard on all aspects of this: the content, the timing, the delivery, rehearsal, like hours and hours and hours. And I would say a speech that lasted about 25 to 30 minutes, no joke, probably put 7 to 8 hours into preparing. And this is, as you were saying before, this is for kids, right? This is for kids. And I would get up to speak at these Shabbatons. And for the first probably 15 minutes, it was just straight up stand-up comedy.
Mhm.
And year after year, I worked really hard on it. So I developed a knack for it. And then the last 10 minutes was the most intense, inspirational, like reach your heart, passionate appeal for them to think bigger than themselves, and whatever theme that I was, and I always bridge the two somehow. And it became almost like an agreement between me and the audience. It's like, I'm going to give you 15 minutes of absolute enjoyment and fun, and then you're going to give me 10 minutes of your attention, but like really your attention.
Wow.
And over the years, we did this, and the guards on the doors disappeared. And not only were there no longer guards at the doors, but kids would like come early. Like, like this became like a highlight
Right.
of the program. That's probably what you saw referenced with the post from
Yeah.
that kid. So
Unbelievable.
that whole experience set me in a particular direction of understanding that, and I think this is true about adults as well, and that is the notion of earning your audience. And earning your audience means that when you get up to speak in front of an audience, that you've put time, effort, energy, thought, creativity into what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and what you're trying to accomplish. And that comes across in the overall experience that they're having. And yes, it's very different for adults and for kids, but this fundamental notion is not different.
Yeah.
Adults, what they want to see out of the preparation, first of all, adults love the comedy too. And I'm not a fan of like I wouldn't say like the classic speaking structure, like you have to have the hook and you have to have the body and you have to have the conclusion. I like to switch it up. But I don't always start with like a hook, like a story or whatever. Sometimes I just start. But the reason that I can do that is because I've delivered enough times the content that resonates with people, and we'll get to that in a minute, both in terms of like enjoying the experience, because I'll bring humor into the experience. I'll bring life experiences into the experience. For adults, I think also for kids, but more for adults, I bring vulnerability into the experience. And so therefore, even if I start with, which is like the cardinal rule not to do in drushes, this week's parsha, which is like the worst way to start a drusha.
Yeah.
At this point, I can start a drusha like that. And they know that something's coming, something's coming. So that really, and so now I speak for kids all the time. I speak for adults all the time. I do a lot of public speaking. It's a big pressure. that I'm jealous of my colleagues don't have, that at this point in their career, they could just get up and deliver content. I would also love to just get up and deliver content. But
Yeah.
people have an expectation at this point that there's
Right.
another layer to it. And so that's kind of how that ended up being part and parcel of the package. And I was doing this at the same time that I was starting my public speaking career in the shul, because I started this NCSY job and the shul job at the same time. The shul is much smaller then.
Mm-hmm.
Now the shul is building and it's much bigger, but at the time it was smaller, and I was able to experiment more with things.
Yeah.
And so I carried a lot of what worked in NCSY over into the shul. I did a lot of that transition was not to do with the drasha, which is our topic of conversation,
Yeah.
programming, but I've done like informal educational techniques to the drasha, like really disruptive, creative things that are not what people are expecting at all, and send things in a different direction. I'm happy to talk about that, down the
Yeah.
line if you want to as well. So that's kind of, I guess, sort of like the beginning of more of the, that underlying principle of like
Yeah.
earning the audience. That obviously
Yeah.
doesn't speak to, my process in terms of preparing the drasha,
Right.
but I'm happy to pause here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If I could reach out and hug you, I would, because I'm of the same philosophy. Coming as being an entertainer, especially as a comedian, you realize that attention isn't free. It looks like people will pay attention to you and they're sitting there politely. If you were a comedian, they would have walked out or would have thrown things at you. But because it's not polite to do that for public speaking, so they'll sit there. But they're not there. They're not with you. They're checked out. So coming at it with the earned attention or earned audience attention is an amazing thing. Most people don't approach it from that angle, where I don't expect you to listen to me just because I'm up here. I actually have to earn your attention with and like you said, people can sense that you put in that preparation. They sense that they're in the hands of a professional. There's a big difference between someone who just gets up and pontificates, and then someone who's actually prepared. And when they see the audience that you take their attention seriously, that you want to earn it, it becomes a beautiful thing. Yeah.
I mean, I could say that, the average drasha I give on Shabbos is probably between 15 and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Some of the may say it's longer. And I would say never less than 3 to 4 hours of prep.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes as much as 5 or 6. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, easily 10 to 12.
Amazing.
Easily. I would say that like the bigger drushos, like Shabbos Hagadol, Shabbos Shuvah, in the 20s and 30s of hours of preparation.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I've been doing this a long time now. I've been doing this for 20 years. And so there are certain things that definitely flow easier, like language is a little more intuitive and whatever, certain things that just over time, you develop certain, but the overall notion that to communicate something of substance and to communicate it substantively and effectively, I think that there are no shortcuts to that. There are shortcuts to preparation in certain spaces, but there are no shortcuts. Once you've decided what you're going to say, the formulation of that and the conceptualization of that, the formulation of that, and the crafting of that, there are no shortcuts, at least that I've discovered, that are effective.
So I have a couple of questions about it. First of all, do you know anyone who puts in that amount of time besides yourself?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I have colleagues. You have to talk to people who like treasure this aspect of the job. Look, you can't have a conversation about drushos without talking about the rabbinate in general.
Yeah.
A lot of people enter the rabbinate with common overall goals, but different areas of focus. And the different areas of focus also emanate from where different people's strengths are. There are incredibly successful rabbis who are not great speakers. And there are rabbis who are great speakers that get thrown out on their, because they don't excel at other areas that are incredibly important. Yeah. This isn't the be all and end all of this space, but at the same time, it's an enormous opportunity and it's an enormously valuable vehicle. And I think the real difference is not so much like who naturally trends towards the drasha is like the essential piece, but who like works on it? Like, is it something
Takes
you work
advantage of it.
so that you really like cultivate and develop and listen to other people and pay attention to what they're doing? I have a lot of mentors. I have one, I would say, primary mentor in the area of drushes, which is Rabbi J.J. Schachter, who I'm very, very close with. And when I was working at YU, one of the things that was in the department that I oversaw was the rabbinic development element, what we call continuing rabbinic education, and that included a big Yarchei Kala that Rabbi Schachter used to run, or he still runs, and so we're very close. He's someone that I've admired and watched and studied and interacted with many, many times, and others and many others, and yeah, I do think there are people who put a lot of time into it. Sure.
Amazing. Who would you? I'm curious. Who would you watch in terms of stand-up comedy when you were trying to develop?
I'm not good with that. I don't even remember. I'm not like holding in stand-up comedy. Well, first of all, I'm very, very, to me, the standards of what I'll listen to and watch, and I don't think I like, certainly, like, we're talking about something that, first of all, I did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
In terms of studying it a little more. So I think the culture was a little different. And I don't even remember what I listened to or what I watched. I wasn't really watching for the entertainment. I was really just looking to understand, a few different people. I think I probably asked, well, I was working at NCSY, so I had teenagers, that would tell me who's clean and but I don't even remember who these people are. When I used to run outreach programs in public schools, so I didn't watch TV, I was studying and learning.
Yeah.
So, but I had to relate to the kids. So I would watch one episode of every popular TV show just so that I could
the characters.
But eventually the kids figured it out because I was always quoting the same episode. And also I would often cross shows of the actors. I would mention one actor in the context of another show and they in 2 seconds. This is not effective. Yeah, but it's a good question. Maybe I'll go back and listen to you.
I was clean. Yeah, I did endeavor to be clean. The thing that intrigues me is how it sounds like there was a clean divide, at least maybe in the beginning, where you would entertain them, and then when that part was over, then you would get into the substance, and then you would go for the jugular and really just dive in and give it everything you had. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in terms of people love to tell jokes or stories as openers, but what ends up happening is that it's almost like clickbait. I'll tell you a story to get your attention, and then okay, well now we have to be serious and boring now, and so people tune out, and then they just want you to wake them up again for the story and for the next joke or whatever. So very few people wield it that way. But it sounds like you went about it very intentionally. You had, I'm going to soften you up. You're going to enjoy what you're about to hear, but we're here for a purpose, and you gave just as much attention to the tochen, the substance part, as you did to the entertainment part, which is really fascinating.
And that's why, look, I hope we talk mostly about the tochen part, but I do think some of this is personality. I definitely, like I said, I'm not a fan of I think the hook model is so ubiquitous in its application now that it's almost predictable, and that undermines the whole purpose of what you're trying to do, trying to catch people by surprise. I just don't find that starting off with some, it's almost expected. So I do think the most effective use of this is when I am able to oscillate the audience emotionally between the humor and the seriousness, and I do that. I would say that every once in a while you mess up when you do that, and you end up taking something that's really serious and should be serious. And because what happens is when you start doing that kind of off the cuff, which I do a lot, you end up taking something that really is serious and almost mocking it, and that we don't want to do. The goal here is not to be cynical and not to be To me, the
Right,
goal
right.
is one word, and that is simcha. That people should enjoy Torah. People
What
should
was the
enjoy
word? I missed the
simcha,
word.
simcha,
Simcha.
joy,
Uh-huh.
happiness. People should enjoy, the learning experience and the growth experience. It should be something they walk away from feeling good about, and look forward to. And I think that that's part of it. Like I just spoke at a chuppah, and I had a couple of, you know, so I started off very serious because we're in a war and we're marrying people off. And who are you to get up and you know? But then, when I do this a lot when they're like least expecting it. We'll insert something, and that I find I enjoy kind of like playing with the audience emotional
Hmm.
stream.
Yeah, yeah. There's like an
And
invisible
also, by the
string.
way, if you're able to do that, then you're also able to hold their attention even longer in the seriousness parts. These are all like basic behavioral principles of
Sure.
psychology. Like when they know that something is coming and they don't know exactly when to expect it, they're more likely to push the lever more time. Like these are all like, you
Yeah.
know, again, like I said, I don't consider this if you don't have something serious and substantive to say, all of this is nothing. Like the goal is not to
Right.
entertain people.
Right. Right. It's a
And,
vehicle.
yeah, and by the way, like when the war broke out for the next 4 weeks, I didn't say anything funny because it wasn't funny, and I didn't feel funny, and I didn't feel, so I definitely, moved off of that.
Hmm.
I had 1 week where I had a bar mitzvah in shul, so I spoke more war oriented, like in the middle of davening, and then for the drasha, I went back more to, because I wanted the bar mitzvah boy to have a positive experience. That was a
Hmm.
judgment call, but
Yeah. Okay. So walk me through your process. So you have to. Today's Wednesday. So where are you in the Dresha process at this point?
okay. So let's leave the schedule out of it because my rabbinate has always entailed um, a simultaneous full-time job alongside it. So where I find these hours is not going to be helpful, I
Yeah.
think, to most people. But what I would say is the following, and here is where Wednesday matters. Like I said, I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, what are you trying to accomplish in your rabbinate at large? What I am trying to accomplish is crystal clear to me. I am trying to inspire, motivate, and support the religious and personal growth of my congregants. That is my goal. And if after 20 years they are at the same level of observance, the same level of devotion in their fatherhood or motherhood, or how they relate to the world or Israel or all these things, in my mind, I have failed with that congregant or with that group of congregants. The goal is not to service them. There's plenty of content out there online and in other spaces. You could listen to podcasts all day. You could listen to shiurim online all day. You could follow a million different of these like more globalist rabbi movements that are amazing and tremendous. Some of them are good friends of mine. And I don't think you need a rabbi to sort of just like get content anymore. So my goal is to inspire growth. I want people to change. I want them to advance. I want them, and they know that. And that is one of the reasons why some people don't come to my shul. In other words, they just, after a while, you get sick of hearing these messages because, you come to shul, you want to hear a nice Dvar Torah and maybe something about politics and what's going on in the world, and the rabbi pontificate about Israel or whatever. And that's not what you're getting. You're getting, how could Shabbos be more meaningful? How could Ben Adam Chavero be more meaningful? How could Israel be more like you're getting much more of a mandate for growth and change and evolution. So that's my goal. And I view a lot of the different other educational elements of the shul as kind of the curriculum of that goal. And I view the drasha as my opportunity to definitely inspire that kind of thinking and growth in the moment. But I know that that moment is fleeting. And so, really, I see the drasha as the main opportunity to get people to think in a different direction, to get people to think about themselves differently, to think about the world differently, to think about Yadus differently, to think about what's going on in their life experience differently, to think about raising their children differently. And that's my goal with the drasha.
Mm-hmm.
So it always begins, the process always begins with what will resonate with them. What are they thinking about? What are they experiencing?
What
And
are they invested in hearing?
right, exactly. Because in other words, this isn't about my agenda but I have other places where I absolutely do that. If I want to teach them right now we're learning the halachos of Avelos, believe it or not, on Sunday mornings. So that's something I want to teach them. So I don't care if they walk in this morning not wanting to learn about, how
Yep.
high the chair is. That's the agenda of the day. And my job is to teach Torah, and that's what I'm going to give them. But at the drasha, I need to, if you're trying to inspire change and growth, then you need to be resonant and you need to be relevant. Relevant means you're speaking to the experience that they are having right now in their life. And resonant means that your message is applicable and aligned and culturally conversant with what it is that you're trying to convey. So, you could have a rabbi that's relevant, like they're picking the right topic, but they're not resonant. They're not actually delivering the material in a way, or the content of the material is not really the insight they're giving. It's not really, and you hear that a lot,
Yep.
like at like a bar mitzvah, a rabbi will get up and they'll speak and they'll give a message that's like bar mitzvah appropriate, but like not at all appropriate to a 13-year-old and what they're experiencing and what their life is, or not always even appropriate to the family's experience of the maturation of their son and grandson.
Right.
I think those are two important elements. And I do not just glean that from current events. I almost never speak about current events. To me, current events are a piece of the context that people are living in. They're not the totality of it. What I'm really more interested in is how they're experiencing current events. And sometimes current events are not so poignant. Right now, we're living through a time where current events are very poignant. But you could have months on end where, unless you're going to talk again about the political polarity of America, there's just not so much happening, So, you spoke about the tension of Achdus in Israel. So you spoke about it last week. So what are you speaking about this week? So current events, not always. Sometimes you have to take a step back and look more broadly. What are the struggles that people are having in finding meaning and purpose in their life and in Yadus? What are the questions that they're dealing with? What are the barriers and obstacles that they're trying to overcome? What issues kind of stand in the way of their ability to actualize their potential? And I spend a lot of time in a room with a yellow pad, just writing down these thoughts. And that's really step one, and often pages and pages. Over Yontif, even more. I have a whole process for Yom No Run where I make a grid that starts with basically the last 2 weeks of Elul and goes all the way through Shabbos Bereshis. It has every single shir and drasha slot that I'm going to give, usually about close to 30. And it has a column for the slot, a column for the theme, a column for the source, a column for the story, a column for the application. And I do that so that I don't turn around at the end of Sukkot and feel like, oh, I spoke about Achdus the whole month and I didn't speak about anything else.
Yeah.
I can kind of track, to make sure the themes I want to hit: family, community, personal growth, Israel, like chesed, whatever. So like when I get up to speak on Shabbos, when I think about what I'm going to speak on Shabbos, that's also a lot of it. I'm trying to get in the head of, and I took this through with colleagues and friends. People cannot imagine how much time Rabbanim spend talking with each other about what they should speak about to their kahila. They care about this a lot, and a lot of time is spent on this. So I'll sometimes talk it out with a friend. What do you think people are thinking about? What's your vibe? sometimes we're very busy during the week doing things related to the rabbinate or doing things in general, and we're just not paying attention to what's going on. I haven't always read every article that they've read and come up Friday night. Can you believe this letter that was put out about that? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
I'm not, like so. So that's, I think, step one. Then step two is I start learning. So I want to tell you something about preparing drushes, and that's counterintuitive. Okay,
Yeah. Lay it on me.
I find the following to be true. Anytime I try to find the Dvar Torah, right, that aligns with the topic I want to speak about, it takes me hours and hours and hours. You have to go through so much material. You have to reject so much material. You have to go a little bit through it, and then what svarim are you going to even look at? And anytime I just take a breath and say, you know what, I'm just going to learn the parsha. Open up the parsha, pick a couple rishonim, or pick one sefer, and just learn for an hour. Almost always, it pops what to use. Even though that's true, I almost never do it that way. Because I don't know. I think the stress and the sense of urgency,
yeah,
and the pressure to find it right away,
yeah,
it's like anything in life. Even though you know that slow and steady will always yield the more impactful and productive outcome. You're just, and especially in today's day and age, we are primed for, like you were saying, clickbait. We are primed for give it to me now, give it to me. So instead of just learning Ramban on the parsha, which will almost always give you what you're looking for, I'll go to this sefer and that sefer and this sefer and that sefer and start 100 things, and so but that's kind of the next stage of the process. Sometimes in that process, I let my head go in different directions. Sometimes in that process, I will change the theme. Like I'll learn something, and I'll almost never. Usually, once I settle on the theme, I can't let it go. But sometimes I'll find something, and I'll be like, oh, you know what? That's a different theme, but that's really beautiful. Maybe I should go there. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to my yellow pad, and I'll start writing down the new theme and what I think comes out of it, little arrows and circles, and see, can I play with the new theme? And then sometimes I'll take a step back and say, okay, should we do the new theme or the old theme? And I'll run that by my wife. I'll say, what do you think? You think this week I should speak about this theme or this theme? Or I'll run that by a colleague or a friend. But eventually you have the material, and you basically have the Torah you want to share. And then it comes time to formulate it into a drasha. So for me, even though I've been doing this for 20 years, I write out every word of every drasha. So the last 20 years is in a Dropbox. Every Yontif, every Parsha, almost every one. I do that for the following reason. So there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is you should speak from a written text, because then your language is most eloquent, because you can prepare it, right? Yeah. The second school of thought is, but then you're staring at the text the whole time and you're not engaging the audience. So you should just speak straight to the audience and give up on the language and make eye contact. And then there's the middle school of thought where have an outline or have some notes or some key phrases written down, but for the most part, speak to the people. So I've tried all the different ways. And I think it depends where your kochos are, what I have found to be best for me is I write out every word, and I'll explain why I do that. I write out every word, but I rehearse it so many times that I don't need the paper, but I have the paper. Why do I have the paper? Because early in my rabbinate, I used to do notes or extemporaneous, And what I found was Friday nights, I would have a lot of trouble concentrating on my family because I was thinking about the drasha. I was very nervous about it. And then Shabbos morning, I'd have a lot of trouble davening, shachris, and concentrating on tefillah because I was constantly thinking about and worried about the drasha. When I started to write it out, I found that both of these things disappeared, because even though I don't use the paper, I have the paper. I have
Wow,
the paper.
that's
So,
brilliant.
you know what? If someone knocks on my door Friday night and I end up dealing with an emergency the whole night and I can't really think through more of the drasha and I have to get up there and read it, I can, you know? Um, my kids make a lot of fun. I have a lot of codes that are on this paper: arrows, circles, underlines, pauses, dashes, like an
Stage
enormous
direction.
amount of trup, I guess, that kind of and I love language, and I love language, and I read a lot, and I listen to how other people use language. Shuls, that shuls connect with the rabbi when they start to make fun of their idiosyncrasies. So,
Mhm.
there's like guys in the back who, like, if I'll use a new vocabulary word, they'll like get all, like worked up. There are certain words that they know I use often, and that becomes like part of the Purim spiel. But I have come to love language. I have come to appreciate that nuance and eloquence and poetry and rhythm in language are enormous tools of communication that even the most impatient people can be captivated with. Even people who have trouble listening to speeches, when they hear alliteration and they hear structure and they hear, you can get them. So that's the difference between adults and kids. There are so many more tools of style that you can use to hold the adults, and including alliteration, including how you use pause, including the building of your voice, including the building of your speed, including recapitulation, like how you come back to pieces at the end that you like seed
Callbacks.
planting at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I work very, very hard on this, and I would say I spend a lot of time on it. Um, and I write them out. And then when it comes time for Shabbos to deliver the drasha, I also have a process. So I come to shul, and like I said, we daven chakras. I'll probably read it over one more time, like in between the aliyahs of Kriyas Torah, maybe even sometimes accidentally the aliyah of Kriyas Torah. And I think in the delivery, one of the things that I think makes delivering a drasha very impactful is what I call vulnerability, which comes out through authenticity and sincerity and a passion that's different than the yelling and screaming and charisma dimension of passion. But what we call yotzim and alev, that it's really coming from you. And I always tell people that if you wanted to write a biography of my life, you could go to my Dropbox and you could just read through my drushas, and encoded in there without me trying to is everything I'm going through. So if I'm going through a struggle, personally, with a particular aspect of Yiddishkeit, that'll come out in the drasha. If I'm
Mhm.
going through a struggle at work, that'll come out through the drasha. If I'm going through a struggle in family, that'll come out through the drasha. I don't mean through examples. I
Yeah.
mean sometimes through examples, but often just
It
it's
exudes
just
it.
the emotionality that layers whatever I'm speaking about will often be a manifestation of whatever inner turmoil or challenge or success that I'm going through is about. And so that makes the drasha very personal to me, very, very personal. For sure, the Yom No Ram drushas are like this. Wherever my head is gonna impact things a lot. So I review it before you know, and then while they put away the Torah during Eitz Chaim Hi, I daven. I daven that it should go well. I remind myself that this is not for me. I remind myself that this is about the people listening. This is not a performance, and that's important to understand. That's different than stand-up comedy. This is not a performance. Um, there's a goal here, and the goal is not for me to do well. The goal is for them to be impacted.
Right.
And I remind
You're a Kli.
myself exactly. I remind myself that I'm a Kli, and I'm thankful for whatever kochos Hashem gave me to be able to do this, which I don't take for granted, and I thank him for that. And then I just ask that it should be successful, that it should be, and I ask it should be inspirational, it should be moving, it should be substantive, and it should be enjoyable. I do,
Right.
And the last thing I remind myself is the core idea that I'm trying to give up, so that I don't start with, oh, what was the one-liner? I start with, don't forget, this Shabbos is about the power of Shabbos, or the power of Tefillah, or Israel, or Nosei Ba'olam Chaveru.
Yeah.
And then I let it go, and sometimes it goes great, and sometimes it goes terrible, and sometimes it goes okay. And then I basically tell God, this is in your hands. These are your people. I did my part. I put a lot of time and effort into preparing this. You want them to grow? Help me make this happen. You don't? So then trip me up, and I'll deal with the ego later.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you a couple of questions. In terms of vulnerability, there's different schools of thought about how much a Rav should open up, and it should be about, leading, let's say, leading from the trenches versus leading from the front, where, there's the, kind of you're on a pedestal and you're leading the flock versus you're in the middle with them, growing with them together, striving. When you're vulnerable about your own struggles and challenges, the risk is that you don't have the same, you might, there might be some shortcoming in dignity or something. You might be sacrificing something in that area. What are your thoughts on that?
So here's where I really benefited from spending the first half of my career also running a teen youth movement, which is I never settled into that rabbinic persona. I had hundreds of teenagers calling me Yaakov, and had I just never kind of settled into that. The way we call it is the sage on a stage persona. What I don't believe in doing is using my pulpit for my own therapy. I don't share what is actually happening to me with my congregants, not because I want them to think that my life is perfect. They know very much it is not, but because that's just a piece of my life. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me, and I want it to belong to me. But I would distinguish between kind of the actual events that are going on and the emotions and sentiments and larger questions and struggles that emerge from those experiences. And that is what I allow myself to be very vulnerable with.
Give me an example.
So when I got up on Simchas Torah, like everyone did, what I said to the shul, and again, this wasn't a prepared speech, so we're just kind of zeroing in on vulnerability.
Sure.
So I got up on Simchas Torah knowing what everybody knew, which was not much, but enough to know that it was a disaster. And I had 2 children in Eretz Yisrael that I had not heard from and didn't know what, and a brother, and no idea, where they were. So I didn't get up and be like, oh, I'm the rabbi, I got this. Let me tell you exactly how we're going to do this now, I got up and I basically said, look, anyone who thinks that we should just go home and cower in our homes and not have any Simchas Torah is, in my opinion, you're missing something. And anybody who thinks that we should just dance because we're going to show them, and without any regard for the fact that our hearts are ripped into 2, I think is either faking it or just has a very callous, we have to do this, and we have to do it in a way that kind of manifests the inner tension that we all feel, And so that's what we did. And however we did it, which is not the topic of this conversation, but the message to the shul was that I'm torn. I don't know what to do. And that's actually the avoda of the moment, not knowing what to do. I didn't say, I'm scared about my children, and I'm like, I didn't share any of that with them,
Hmm.
but I was revealing in the fact that like I'm not going to pretend that I have the rabbinic confidence to like this is like, and I could have landed us in the exact same space by manufacturing like okay, I went into my study and I thought this through the prism of Torah, and I emerged with this is what we're going to do. That like pompous rabbinic, like
Yeah.
that's not what I did. I was like, I'm lost, I'm confused, I'm struggling. This is what I think we should do with the struggle. And that's what I mean by vulnerability.
Hmm.
Being able to be, we have a beautiful thing we're doing now, which I'm so proud of. And it's not me, it's them. We were looking for ways to improve in response to the war, not just help the war. So, which is what the Rambam says he's supposed to do in response to crisis. He's supposed
Yeah.
to do tshuva. So one of the things that we have, like many shuls, is like Motzei Shabbos, you have to Mariv, everybody's like right out of there, you know? So I thought maybe instead of running out of shul, when davening's over on Motzei Shabbos, we should sit down and learn about tefillah for 10 minutes. So we picked a sefer called Sha'arim B'Tefillah, which is written by Rav
Because, yeah.
Pincus,
Yeah.
who was a Rosh Hashiva in Ofakim. So
Wow.
community.
Right. That's right. Down south.
So I explained exactly like why we were doing this sefer.
Hmm.
It's also probably there are two svarim that I think on tefillah are there are many svarim on tefillah that I love, but the two Hebrew ones that I think are the best are his and the Sifsei Chaim on
Yeah.
the Shmones. Amazing.
Should I tell you? I heard his father speak, Rav Pincus's father.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah, Rav Pincus used to speak every Leil Rosh Hashanah at Torah or Yerushalayim. And the year that he passed away, his father spoke, and instead of him, and his father was one of the Shanghai, the Mir, one of those escapees. And he said that one of the Gedolim told him that the Sefer Sha'arim B'Tefillah that his son wrote, he said a Sefer like that has not come out since like the previous generation of in Europe. That caliber of Sefer has not come out. That was that one of the Gedolim told him that.
I think one of the reasons why that sefer is so impactful is because he's vulnerable in that sefer.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that he didn't get to where he is in tefillah without, like, he knows, if he knows what we're struggling with in tefillah, it's because he struggled with it. He's not a prophet,
No.
So anyway, I'm very strict about the 10 minutes because I want people to know that like 10 minutes is not going to turn into 12 and 15.
Right.
When it hits 10 minutes, we stop. So we've been learning about tefillah for 10 minutes after Motzei Shabbos. And in going through this sefer, I talk about my struggles with tefillah. I talk about it. It's hard. It's hard. I don't necessarily like give them specific examples of moments where like I'm faking it, as a rabbi, but I do like surface it's hard. It's hard for everybody. So, I think that's where I think the vulnerability is impactful. And there too, I would say this Rebbe, this mentor, Rabbi Schachter, is a tremendous leader to me.
Mm-hmm.
He's very vulnerable. You're talking about someone that's one of the most brilliant minds in the last 50 years in the Jewish world, longer. Harvard PhD, massive Talmud Chacham, a father who was, he himself, a career, published Ein L'Davar Sof.
Yeah.
And when you listen to him speak, you could tell that he's working on himself. And that to me is like why I think the drasha and the rabbin are connected. I want the shul to understand. I want them to work on themselves. I'm also working on this. It's not always so easy,
Amazing.
Sometimes I regret. Sometimes I share a little too much, and I regret it afterwards. And it's hard for me,
How does your family feel about it? Do they ever get self-conscious about it?
My family, there were a couple points where I was sharing too much about my struggles that were revelatory about the family, and there was pushback on that, and I changed it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really do that.
Yeah.
My wife gets embarrassed and nervous about things that'll come out of my mouth because we're different personalities, and she definitely The women in the shul love watching her. Most of them, if I'll say something that's a little edgy or whatever, most of them will not look at me. They'll look at her.
Right. They'll watch her slouching in her seat.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
I know that feeling.
yeah, and I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes with that. I want to say that like it's a lot safer to just prepare a vart and a nice application and get up and say it than to let your stream of consciousness enter the public space. It's a lot safer, and so sometimes I mess up. Sometimes I mess up.
Yeah.
You know?
So we don't have a whole lot of time left, but what I'm really curious about is the approach of looking for something in the parsha. You know, it's Parshas Vayishlach this week. So you're looking for some. Are you looking? Is it the theme first? Is it the vort first? Is it? Sometimes it changes. You know, depending on the week. What comes first? Is there something burning in your heart that you have to address the kihila about, and then you go and you'll find something in the parsha, or to support it, even though it might be a little bit loose? Or are you looking for something transformative in the parsha and saying, like, let's build off this?
Right. So for all the other shiurim that I give, it's you look for the best and most compelling content. Like I'm preparing a Hanukkah shiur now. So I've been learning a lot of different sugyas in Hanukkah. I'm looking for the most interesting, creative, compelling Hanukkah Torah. And then I'll figure it out how to apply it to what's going on in our life. The drasha, I usually try to start from the other end, but I will say that sometimes you hit like rabbi's block. You can't think of a theme. It's okay. So then what I'll do, I always try to think of the theme first. If I can't think of a theme, then I'll start learning. And then sometimes a theme will pop. And once in a while, I can't even think of a theme like that. And so then I'll just say, okay, what are some of the values that are important in Torah that I have not spoken about recently that I can go ahead and speak about? And I will say that those drushas where my process didn't work, and I end up like choosing something that I think is more random, I always get like, in certain ways, even better feedback on those, because inevitably it'll be something that I never speak about. And it's like, how many times could you listen to Glasser talk about growth? You know what I mean? And challenge, you know? And all of a sudden, like, it's just a nice drasha on achnasas orchid. It has nothing to do with growth, you know? Just be welcoming to people and hospitable to people and create an environment that's open to people. And people are like, that was really, you know, so like, but so I would say mostly I try to start with the theme. Sometimes I pivot to the Torah, but problem is that Torah is so limitless. So it's like, and also because a little bit I suffer from being a perfectionist, which is not a great midah in this line of work. As a result, the problem with the looking from the vart is I'll always say to myself, maybe there's a better one.
It's not strong enough.
I have a hard time stopping, you know, which is what's happening with the Hanukkah shiur right now. You know, I have a hard time stopping. Like, oh, maybe I'd come with something better, you know?
I'll give you a good one. If you love Repenkus, there was a life-changing one from him. I named my son after him because of this essay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called Torah Shashuai. It's in two places. It's in Hanukkah and also in Torah Ukinyana. If you look at it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'll look at it.
Yeah.
You learned in Torah or?
No. I had a friend there. I learned in Zichron Yaakov. The yeshiva is not active anymore, but it used to be in Zichron Yaakov. And I when I was in Shidduchim, I would come down to stay with friends who were in Torah or in Yerushalayim. So
my son is living here now. He's in his third year there.
Oh, he's there now. Oh, so he probably has access to Orlowick and.
He learns with the Orlowick one-on-one.
That's very special. Amazing. All right, we have only a couple of minutes left. I know your time is super valuable. I want to shoot a couple of questions at you. One of them is, do you ever find yourself coming to shul, having the drasha totally prepared, and then saying, it's not going. It's not what I want to say. It's not what these people need to hear. Do you just end up jettisoning it and going somewhere in a totally different direction unprepared? Does that ever happen?
Yes. Yes, that has happened. My wife will tell you it happens more often than I think it does. She'll be like,
Mhm.
"That's not what you told me you were speaking about," you know? Yes, that has happened. I try to minimize it happening because it comes along with a lot of distraction and a lot of stress. I
Yeah.
feel very stressful when I have to do that. But absolutely, absolutely that's happened. And sometimes it's happened because I get to shul and like once you're in the space, you're like, you know what? It wasn't good. Just not good. I don't have I lose confidence in it.
Yeah. It's one thing when you prepare it in a vacuum.
Something else. Yeah, sure that happens. It's a little easier now because I have a long history of material, you know.
Yeah.
I also try very, very hard to always come up with something new. I try very hard not to, once in a while I'll use a mucker that I've used before. That the shul definitely will tell you that there are certain like go-to Hanukkah makaros that they're expecting to hear. But the packaging and the application of it and the development of it, I always try to be mechadish bodover. I try not to print out a drasha from 14 years ago and give it.
Yeah.
I almost never do that.
Yeah.
Almost.
Probably when you look at it, you're because the drush is so personal for you, you probably evolved a lot since then, and it's just not even relevant as
Correct.
for you as a person.
Correct. But sometimes, this past Shabbos we had a bar mitzvah. I was looking through some of the old stuff, and what was interesting was the one of the makaros that I used years ago, not for a bar mitzvah, was perfect for a bar mitzvah during the war.
Wow.
So I cleaned it up because the
Yeah.
language was not where I'm up to now.
Yeah.
And I definitely shifted a lot of it. Like I don't think anybody heard it as a repeat, you
Yeah.
know. But I think also we shouldn't be afraid. Like again, this is where you have to differentiate between when is it about you and when is it about them. So if you have something substantive and real and impactful to share, even though you've shared it like 15 years ago, and it will, in this context, move people, and you like convince yourself, no, I'm not going to use it because I have to produce something new. It's not about you. Like if that's the best, if to be honest with yourself, if that's the best, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Best feedback you've ever gotten, and it may come in the form of words, or it may come in the form of a an action someone took, or a change someone made.
The best feedback is when people tell you that it affected a decision, it affected a mindset. It doesn't have to affect. They don't have to become, they have to do something. But even if it shifted their mindset, I hadn't thought about it before, or I was very confused about this, and hearing you like helped me,
Breakthrough.
right, helped me break through, helped me clarify it, gave me last Shabbos I spoke about returning hostages, and again, like I was honest. I think everybody feels like just this bilbo of emotions, like absolute elation at the reunification of these families, and like extreme, anger that this has to happen, and that there are more that are not coming, and that, like, and what do you do with all that? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, so you're trying to develop a mahalach that if it could help somebody, if somebody tells you, I was really, I didn't know how to digest this, and now I can, and the Torah helped them do that. So that's a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, because that's exactly what you want people to understand. That meaning and purpose in their life comes from Torah. And so if somewhere in the Torah you could extrapolate a perspective and a mahalach that helps clarify something that's from a human standpoint is so challenging to people, then in my opinion, you've helped them integrate Torah in a significant way.
Amazing. Okay, last question. If you have one piece of advice to offer a new emerging rabbi uh, in terms of his approach to the drasha, what would you, how would you encapsulate it?
Um, the more time you put into it, the more impactful it's going to be. It doesn't have to be the center of your rabbanos. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to. But if you want it to be, then you have to be prepared to put time into it. And I think that's, I think that's I think you have to be able to put time into it and put yourself into it, and that's my advice. Not use this safer versus that safer,
Yeah. Yeah. Take it seriously.
take
If,
it seriously
if it's
and
important to
respect your audience. Respect your audience. They're not just there to and not because you're an employee, but because you've decided to devote your life to this. You have an opportunity here to move people. And it's a big gift. I mean, I remind myself all the time, you look out at the crowd and there's, hundreds of people there. And you say to yourself, none of these people get to stand up and move everybody. Only I do, that's a huge responsibility and it's a huge privilege. And it's really disrespectful to them and to the opportunity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you to not put the time and energy and thoughtfulness and creativity into what you're doing. It really is. That's how I feel, Now, again, it could be some people put all of that into their pastoral aspects of their rabbinate, and they would think that I don't spend enough time at hospitals and shiva homes. Fair, I'm saying it's not for everybody.
Right. There's a great quote. Maybe we can end on this, but I think there was a crime novelist, and he said, if your story doesn't keep you up at night writing it, don't expect it to keep up people at night reading it. Right. So I kind of use that as my barometer when, if I give it my all and I swing for the fences, then I can expect them to pay attention. But if I'm not going to do that, then I can't have any tightness.
Right. Well, look, in comedy that one of the fundamental principles is you have to commit. Because if you hesitate, because you're unsure if what you're going to say is funny, you will suck the energy out of any of its potential and it'll fall flat no matter what.
Right.
But what's hard about committing is that you do fail. And the failing when you commit is harder because you are more sure of yourself. And so it feels, from a confidence standpoint, much more deflating and much more undermining.
Wow.
But, and that happens. Like I say things that I think are funny and, you know what I mean? Like, and that's when you bring in the self-deprecate, whatever, but you have to commit. And I think that's true in the teaching as well, in the Torah as well. You have to really walk in and commit to this is the opportunity to change hearts and minds for the next 20 years. You have to commit to that. And you can't be like, I was thinking, also, I'm very against, there are certain things that I think really undermine what you're trying to accomplish. When you get up there and you're like telling everybody how hard it is, or, I was, in terms of I was trying to find something to speak about this Shabbos. I couldn't find anything. I couldn't, you
don't need to hear
that's
that.
different than struggling with the issue that you're presenting, people have to feel like, you're committed to this. And I think
you're in the hands of a professional.
Yeah. Something I do on Yom Noraim, I don't know how public, I don't even know exactly what we're recording here, but
hopefully someone will listen to it.
On Yom Noraim, I print out the drushes on resume paper, high quality paper. And I do that because to me, it's like an expression of Hidur Mitzvah. I give up a lot of Yom Noraim to lead instead of participate. A lot of my own ruchnius, right?
Right, distraction.
But I'm worried about the speaking and the air conditioning and the this and the seats and I give up a lot. So what I do is really important, and I have to treat it as something that's important. And so I print it on something important,
Wow.
And it's and when I get up there, I feel like a mensch. I feel like a mensch. I have a lot of these little tricks that I think help you, kind of, like you were saying about the writer. You have to be machshav what you do. That's not arrogance. It's
Yeah.
arrogance to think that it's about you. And it's arrogance to think that there's something special about you that got this gift as opposed to anybody else. It's a gift. And your job is to do something with it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And the gift is the capacity and the gift is the venue. And it's, I wouldn't trade it, for the world.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about the Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.